The first time I truly questioned my sanity, I was curled up on the bathroom floor, clutching a pair of lace underwear that didn't belong to me. They weren't mine. They weren't my style, weren't my size. But they were in my laundry, folded neatly like someone wanted me to find them. My husband's scent was on them, faint but familiar, and it knocked the breath out of my lungs. My ears rang. My heart felt like it had split in two. For a moment I sat there trembling, whispering to myself, maybe I bought them and forgot. Maybe they came with the wrong packaging. Maybe. But that's the worst part. That was the moment I started doubting myself. Not him, not anyone else. Me. And that's exactly what my sister wanted. I'm Danielle, and this is the story of how I was manipulated, gaslit, and nearly destroyed by the one person I trusted most in this world, my little sister. She didn't just try to steal my husband. She tried to erase me from my own life. And for a while, I let her. Vanessa was the kind of beautiful that turned heads in every room. The kind of girl who smiled and got away with murder. Figuratively, of course. I was the opposite. Responsible, organized, the peacemaker in the family. The one who picked up the pieces. When her last relationship crashed and burned, she called me sobbing. "I can't be alone, Danny. I have nowhere to go," she cried. Of course I let her move in. What kind of sister would I be if I didn't? My husband Brian wasn't thrilled. He gave me one of those tight-lipped smiles and said, "Sure. For a few weeks, right?" I laughed and nodded. But a few weeks turned into a few months and something in our house shifted. At first I thought I was imagining it. A weird look between them when I walked into the room. A joke I didn't get, followed by Vanessa's high-pitched laugh and Brian's chuckle that used to be just for me. She started wearing tighter clothes around the house, borrowing my tops, lounging around without a bra. I told myself she was just trying to feel better after her breakup. I told myself Brian loved me. But then came the late-night drinks they shared while I was upstairs reading. The wine glasses she'd leave out, 2 of them even when I hadn't had a drop. The whispering behind closed doors. The times I'd ask a question and they'd both say, "Huh? What?" Like they hadn't heard me, or didn't want to. Still, I tried to be the bigger person. I made excuses for both of them. I worked harder. Dressed up more. Cooked romantic dinners. Scheduled a weekend getaway Brian forgot about. And every time I brought up something that felt off, they turned it back on me. "Danny, you're always so dramatic. Are you seriously jealous of your own sister? You've been so paranoid lately. You okay?" Their voices blended together until I couldn't tell who I was anymore. My world blurred at the edges. I began second-guessing my every thought, my every instinct. I started writing things down. What time they got home, what I thought I saw, just so I could convince myself I wasn't crazy. But Vanessa was brilliant at this game. She'd slip in comments like, "You've been forgetting things a lot, haven't you?" Or, "You used to be so fun. What happened?" Then she'd flash me that sugary smile, tuck her hair behind her ear and act like she cared. The gaslighting wasn't loud. It was quiet, poisonous, like a drop of something sour in your morning coffee. Subtle enough to swallow. But after a while, it eats you from the inside out. I broke the day I found the perfume. My perfume. The one Brian gave me on our 2nd anniversary. The one I wore only for special nights, nights we hadn't had in months. I found it in the guest room. On Vanessa's pillow. Sprayed heavily as if someone was trying to mark the space. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, the bottle in my hand, breathing in the cruel scent of betrayal. That night I didn't confront them. I couldn't. I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. Because if I confronted them without it, they'd twist it again. Make me question everything. And I couldn't afford to lose myself any further. But they didn't know one thing about me. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. Because I forgave easily. Because I never fought back. What they forgot was that I don't fight fair when I've been pushed too far. So I started watching. Recording. Noting every time Vanessa worked late or Brian fell asleep on the couch. I tracked every step. Every lie. Every accidental brush of the hand between them. And I knew when the time came, I wouldn't just expose them. I'd make sure they remembered it forever. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Brian, listening to his even breathing, pretending my heart wasn't breaking into 1,000 silent pieces. Every inhale he took felt like a lie pressed against my ribs. I watched the moonlight crawl across the ceiling and made a promise to myself. They wanted me to think I was crazy? Fine. I'd play crazy. I woke up the next morning and made blueberry pancakes, Brian's favorite. I hummed to myself in the kitchen, set the table just right, even poured fresh orange juice into the fancy glasses we barely used. I smiled like everything was fine, like my soul wasn't on fire. Vanessa walked in, hair messy, wearing his old t-shirt. "Oh," she blinked, surprised. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said sweetly. "I thought we could have a nice breakfast. As a family." Brian entered right after her, stifling a yawn. He looked between us, hesitating just slightly before giving me a kiss on the cheek. "Wow, pancakes." I beamed. "Just like you like them." He sat. Vanessa sat beside him. And I watched them. I watched how their legs nearly touched under the table. I watched how she leaned into him when she laughed too hard at something I said. I watched how he didn't even flinch. I chewed each bite like it was paper. And that's when I started planting the seeds. "I've been thinking," I said casually, drizzling syrup over my stack. "Maybe I should see someone. A therapist." Vanessa perked up immediately. "Really? That's a great idea, Danny. I've been telling you, you seem off lately." Brian nodded, swallowing his mouthful too fast. "Yeah, it might help. Just to talk things out, you know?" I nodded like a good little wife. "Exactly. I think it's time I sort through the fog." They looked relieved. Like the game was almost won. But I wasn't unraveling. I was setting the stage. The next week I booked a therapy appointment, but not just any therapist. I found someone who specialized in gaslighting, emotional abuse, and familial betrayal. I didn't just want to talk, I wanted to build a case. And I told her everything. Every moment I questioned myself. Every glance. Every whisper. Every time I walked into a room and the air shifted. She didn't tell me I was crazy. She told me I was being played. She told me something else, too. Something that planted the first seed of vengeance in my chest. "You don't need to prove anything to them," she said. "But if you're determined to fight back, do it smart. Don't scream. Don't accuse. Let them hang themselves with their own rope." So I did just that. I started keeping voice notes. Every little interaction. The time Vanessa walked into our bedroom by accident. The time Brian mysteriously left his phone in the guest room overnight. The time I heard muffled giggling behind a closed door at midnight. I documented everything. And then I brought in an old friend. Lena and I had been close in college, but we drifted when life got in the way. She was a private investigator now. When I reached out and told her everything, she didn't even hesitate. "I'm in," she said. "Let's catch these two snakes in the act." So while I smiled and played house, Lena followed them. She tracked Vanessa's movements. Took photos. Notes. Patterns. And one Thursday afternoon she texted me 2 words that turned my blood cold. "Hotel. Room 304. I stared at the screen, my hand trembling, then looked at the clock. Brian had told me he was stuck in a late meeting. Vanessa had said she was getting her nails done. They weren't clever. They were predictable. I didn't go to the hotel that day. I didn't scream. I didn't storm in and demand answers. I waited. And that weekend I planned something they would never forget. Brian's birthday was coming up. I told him I wanted to throw a little dinner. Just the 3 of us. Something intimate. He smiled and kissed me. "You're amazing, you know that?" I wanted to laugh in his face. But I didn't. I smiled back. "You haven't seen anything yet." I made sure everything was perfect for Brian's birthday dinner. The lights were dim, the table set with the good china. I even lit the expensive vanilla sandalwood candle he loved but never admitted to liking. I wore his favorite dress. Silky navy blue, the one with the slit up the side. The dress I wore on our honeymoon. Vanessa showed up 15 minutes late in a plunging red wrap dress. She didn't even try to hide her smirk when she saw me. "Wow, Danny. You clean up nice," she said, hanging her coat as if she owned the place. I didn't rise to it. "It's a special night." Brian walked in right after, carrying a bottle of wine. "You two look incredible." He kissed me on the cheek. He hugged her longer. I noticed. I noticed everything now. Dinner started off pleasant. We ate the rosemary chicken I'd perfected over the years. I let them lead the conversation, laughing at each other's dumb jokes, flirting under the table like I didn't exist. And then when Brian cut into his cake, I poured the wine. To Brian, I said, raising my glass. For another year of surprises. They clinked glasses with me, grinning like fools. I let a beat pass. Just enough silence to make them shift uncomfortably. Then I pulled out the envelope. It was thick. Bulging. What's that? Vanessa asked, eyeing it suspiciously. A gift, I said, handing it to Brian. From me. To you. He looked confused but opened it anyway. I watched his eyes scan the contents. The photos, the transcripts, the printed text messages from burner accounts Lena had traced. His smile died instantly. Vanessa leaned over, trying to see. What is it? I turned to her slowly. You really want to know? He grabbed a page and gasped. There she was, clear as day, entering a hotel with Brian. Holding his hand. Kissing him outside room 304. Another photo showed them leaving separately, her smiling, him looking paranoid. Brian stood up suddenly. Danny, this isn't what it looks like. Oh really? I stood too, voice calm but cold. Because it looks exactly like what I thought it was. You two didn't just betray me. You gaslit me. Made me question my own sanity. Danny. I threw the rest of the photos on the table. You told me I was paranoid. You said I needed therapy. And maybe I did. But not because I was wrong. Because I was surrounded by liars. Vanessa's face was pale now. You went through my things? No, sweetheart, I said, turning toward her with a venomous smile. I watched you. While you were watching me fall apart. Brian dropped into his chair, head in his hands. I trusted you, I whispered. I trusted both of you. And instead of helping me when I was at my lowest, you chose to exploit it. My own sister. Vanessa's voice cracked. It didn't mean anything. I swear. I laughed. Oh, it meant something. It meant everything. She looked at Brian for support. He didn't speak. I turned to him. You once told me I was the most loyal woman you'd ever met. Do you remember that? He nodded, eyes watery. Well, I said, loyalty's a funny thing. He thought I'd break down. That I'd shrink. But I'm not the woman you gaslit. I'm the woman who watched you lie, and let you believe I believed it. I walked to the living room and picked up a second folder. This one had divorce papers. Custody plans. Financial records I'd spent weeks quietly organizing. Danny, Brian whispered, please. Can we talk? We'll talk in court, I said, tossing the folder in front of him. You can keep the wine glass. I've already packed your clothes. Vanessa looked like she'd been punched. And you, I said, turning to her, you may want to find another couch to crash on. Because the locks are changing tomorrow. She opened her mouth to protest. But I cut her off. This was my house. My marriage. My peace. And you tried to rip it all away from me. So now you can figure out how to live with what's left. I turned and walked upstairs, leaving them both in stunned silence. Behind me the candle flickered. It was no longer his scent. It was mine. I didn't cry. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even when I watched Brian drive off with his things stuffed into black garbage bags like some stranger I once loved. I stood at the window, arms crossed, heart heavy but dry-eyed. My grief had burned away, leaving behind something sharper. Something cleaner. Clarity. Vanessa didn't leave that night. She tried to stay, insisting I was overreacting. That she had nowhere else to go. That we were family. You're still my sister, she said, voice trembling as I handed her a box of her things. No, I said, looking her in the eye. You were my sister. You chose something else. Danny, I made a mistake, she sniffed, mascara smudged. I never meant for it to happen like that. You mean you never meant to get caught, I said flatly. Let me ask you something, Vanessa. When you watched me unravel, when you saw me crying over how distant Brian had become, did you ever feel guilty? Her silence was answer enough. I didn't scream. I didn't slap her. I just closed the door behind her and locked it. Then I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen island, and started to breathe again. That weekend I finally visited Lena in person. She met me at a quiet cafe near her office, away from anyone who might recognize us. She slid a new folder across the table. It was thick, filled with legal language and fine print. "This is everything we talked about," she said, "including the property ownership breakdown and Brian's secret accounts. Turns out he's been hiding more than just your sister." I raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" Lena nodded. "Your husband, ex-husband soon enough, has a little offshore habit. He funneled part of his bonus into a separate account under a shell name. It's illegal. And stupid." I blinked. "He's always been cocky, but that?" "He thought you'd never look," she said. "Thought you were too fragile." I let out a soft laugh. "They really thought I was losing it." "You were never losing it, Danny. You were being played. There's a difference." That afternoon I took Lena's documents to a second lawyer, a specialist in asset recovery and high-conflict divorces. I didn't want revenge. I wanted what was mine. I wanted to make sure Brian couldn't just slide out the back door with half my future. And more than that, I wanted to rebuild piece by piece from the wreckage they left behind. But the hardest part wasn't the legal fight. It was the whispers. Word got out, small towns are like that. People started looking at me with tilted heads and forced sympathy. As if I'd just been too naive, or too dramatic, or worse, too emotional to keep her man. Even my own mother called me. "You know, your sister's always been a little wild," she said as if that excused it. "Maybe you should have been more attentive. Maybe Brian wouldn't have." I hung up mid-sentence. I didn't owe anyone grace anymore. I'd spent years folding myself into the perfect wife, the perfect sister, the dependable daughter. And none of it protected me from betrayal. None of it made them love me more. So I stopped performing. I went back to therapy, this time on my own terms. I stopped apologizing for my anger. I stopped explaining why I needed boundaries. I started sleeping better, eating better, living better. But there was still one thing left I hadn't done. One thing only I knew. Something I'd tucked away in the attic behind an old cedar chest, months ago when I first started noticing cracks in my marriage. It was the backup drive. Brian had always been sloppy with his tech. And before things got really bad, before he and Vanessa realized I was paying attention, I'd copied everything from his laptop. Emails, text logs, work files. And in those files was something damning. Not just to him, but to her. Vanessa had a secret too. One she didn't know I'd uncovered. And I was saving it. Waiting. Because I knew her. Knew how she operated. Knew she'd be back. He always came back. Especially when there was something she could take. She came back 6 months later. Not to apologize. Not to take accountability. Vanessa showed up in a tight red dress and designer sunglasses, the same way she always did when she wanted something. She knocked on my door like she still had the right, like time would somehow soften the scorch marks she left behind. I opened it, already knowing this day would come. "Danny," she said with a pitiful smile. "Well, better than I expected." I didn't reply. I waited. She hesitated. "Look, I know things got messy. But Brian and we're not together anymore." A flicker of satisfaction crossed her face like she thought this was good news. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" I asked. She shrugged, stepping over the threshold before I could say no. "I just wanted to talk. I've been thinking about us. About how we let him get between us." I stared at her. "We didn't let him do anything. You made your choice." Her eyes narrowed, the mask slipping just a little. "Don't act like you didn't have a part in it. There was the old Vanessa. Twist the knife, then blame you for bleeding." "You're not here for closure," I said, walking to the kitchen and pouring myself some tea. "What do you want?" She blinked, caught off guard. Oh, fine. Things didn't work out. I've been couch hopping. I just need a place to stay for a few weeks. Until I figure things out." Actually laughed. "You want to stay here? After everything?" "It's still Mom's house," she said coldly. "You just live in it." And there was the real reason. The house. Mom had left it to me in her will, but Vanessa always believed it should have been hers. She didn't even come to the reading. But now that she was broke, single, and running out of options, suddenly she remembered we were sisters. "You need to leave," I said. "Danny." I stepped closer, unblinking. "You broke me. You and Brian shattered my entire world. And now you want a bed to crash in like it never happened." "You're being dramatic," she said, rolling her eyes. "Wrong move." I reached into the drawer by the kitchen table, pulled out a small flash drive and placed it on the counter. "What's that?" she asked. "Something I've kept. Emails. Screenshots. Bank transfers. Some from him, some from you." She went pale. "You hacked me. You were using my Wi-Fi. You left your phone synced to my cloud account for months. You practically gift-wrapped the evidence." She lunged for the flash drive, but I slid it away calmly. "Sit down," I said. "You want to pretend like we're still family? Fine. Let's talk like family." Reluctantly she sat. I opened my laptop and started clicking through the folder. Her face strained more with every image. The proof was all there. Messages about manipulating me, mocking me, calling me a basket case. Transactions she made on my old accounts, bills she rerouted into my name. Even a fake therapist she had Brian text, pretending to be concerned about me. "You gaslit me into thinking I was mentally ill," I said, voice trembling. "Do you understand how sick that is?" She didn't speak. "I could press charges," I continued. "What you two did wasn't just cruel, it was criminal." Now she looked scared. "Good. But I haven't gone to the police." "Not yet." Vanessa swallowed hard. "So what do you want?" That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? I wanted justice. But more than that, I wanted control. I wanted the power she had stolen from me back in my hands. "I want you gone. I want you to disappear. I want you to sign away any claim to this house or anything else Mom left. I want to never hear from you again." She nodded quickly. Okay, just delete it. I'll sign whatever. "And I want you to tell the truth," I added. "To everyone. About what you did. About what Brian did. About me." She froze. "Post it, email it, shout it on your little podcast, I don't care. You fix what you broke. Or I will. And I have every receipt." For the first time in her life, Vanessa had nothing to say. She signed the papers that afternoon. And the next morning I woke up to 20 missed calls, friends, coworkers, even distant cousins calling to say, "I had no idea. I'm so sorry." Vanessa posted a long, shaky video online, calling it her truth, but it was mine. Every word of it was what I demanded. And then she vanished. No calls. No texts. Just gone. I stood in the empty living room that night, the silence around me finally feeling safe. And as the sunset poured in through the window, I realized I wasn't broken anymore. I had rebuilt. I didn't expect peace to feel so quiet. After Vanessa disappeared, I kept waiting for the next explosion. The next cruel message, the next betrayal hiding in plain sight. But days passed, then weeks, and nothing came. Just life. Gentle, uneventful, and shockingly mine. I started sleeping through the night again. No nightmares, no midnight tears soaked into my pillow. My therapist said it would take time to truly heal, but this was the beginning. One day I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in nearly a year. Inside were old journals, letters I'd written to Mom but never mailed, and at the very back, a photo. Me, Vanessa, and Brian. We looked happy. I looked safe. I almost didn't recognize that version of myself. It was the first time I could look at that photo and not feel like I'd been punched in the chest. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just placed it back in the drawer and closed it quietly. Because I didn't need reminders of what I'd lost anymore. I was building something better. I reconnected with people I'd pushed away during the worst of it. My best friend Melissa came over for wine nights again. We laughed until our cheeks hurt, watched bad reality TV, and made fun of our younger selves. For the first time in ages, I felt like myself. I even started writing again. Just little stories, blog posts, nothing major, but it felt like stretching muscles that had been frozen. There was power in finding my voice again. One morning, as I stood watering the plants Mom had once loved, I got an unexpected call. It was Brian's mother. I hesitated but picked up. "Danny," she said, her voice cracking, "I just wanted to say, I'm so sorry." I didn't respond right away. I let her sit in the silence, in the discomfort. "I know what my son did," she said. "And I know what your sister did. And I should have said something earlier. But I didn't. I thought it wasn't my business. I thought you'd be fine." "Why now?" finally asked. "Because I saw the video. And because I lost my son too." I didn't ask what she meant. She continued, "He's in rehab now. Tried to drink himself into oblivion after Vanessa left him. And I think he finally realizes what he destroyed." I felt nothing. Not rage. Not joy. Just a cool, quiet distance. "Thank you for telling me," I said, then ended the call. Brian's collapse didn't surprise me. Men like him are always fine until they lose their control. Until they meet someone who finally stops playing the fool. I went to the backyard that evening and lit a small fire in the pit Mom used to love. I threw in the old journals, the cruel notes I'd found on Vanessa's cloud, screenshots of emails Brian had written mocking me behind my back. One by one they turned to ash. And as the fire burned, I felt something loosen in my chest. Letting go wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about pretending none of it happened. It was about choosing myself. About stepping out of the wreckage and realizing I was never the broken one. They were. I had just been the mirror they couldn't stand to face. Now I live in the house Mom left me, and every room is filled with light again. I redecorated. New colors, new furniture. It doesn't look like a tomb anymore. It looks like a beginning. Sometimes people ask if I ever talk to my sister. I just smile and say, no. And I'm better for it. Because the truth is, not every story of betrayal ends with reconciliation. Some stories end with strength. Mine did. And if you've ever been lied to, gaslit, pushed into thinking you're not enough, just know this. You are. You're more than what they said about you. You're more than the lies they whispered. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You were targeted because you had something they couldn't steal, your core. And one day when they finally crumble under the weight of their own lies, you'll still be standing. Just like I am. So if you've ever been pushed to doubt your own reality, if you've ever been hurt by the people who should have protected you most, just know you're not alone. And if this story resonated with you, I'd love for you to stick around. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment if you've lived through something similar. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and full of the kind of truth people don't always say out loud, make sure you're subscribed. I share new stories every day. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.